Hello, my lovely listeners. I'm Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns. Welcome to this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. Good morning, gorgeous ones. Dr. Lucy here. Every now and then you hear that word trailblazer, and look, it's used fairly willy-nilly, but I'm here this morning with one of the actual trailblazers in the low-carb space, the man who has carved the way for all doctors to be able to recommend low-carb to their patients safely, because he's done all the hard work for us. So I am super thrilled to have and welcome to the podcast, Dr. Gary Fettke. Gary, welcome.
Good morning, Lucy. Great to catch up once again. Not quite face-to-face, but we a little stretch of water between us.
Yeah, no, absolutely great to be speaking in real time anyway.
I mean, we miss out on those international low-carb conferences and catching up with people. But just last week, Belinda and I caught up with Zoe and Andy Harcum for 2 hours. They're in the Wales, and we're literally just yapping away and having... and Zoom. And Doug Reynolds, who runs Low Carb USA and SMHP, we had a chat for an hour the other morning. And you go, because those people have stayed with us and we've stayed with them, it is still welcome to Zoom. That's keeping our sanity alive and recharging batteries.
Indeed. And for those, beautiful people in Tasmania, or anyone that wants to make the trek across the water to Tasmania, Gary is speaking at Low Carb Hobart, and we are absolutely thrilled to have it. And if you've ever watched any of Gary's YouTube videos on Low Carb Down Under, he was talking about all this stuff before it became cool. And we were just talking about the cool kids. And these days, for a lot of us, low carb is just standard. Every now and then, some people, they've still never heard of it, and they've still been stuck in the sort of low fat movement. But yeah, Gary, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for, the work that you've done, and in particular, Belinda in recent times, just exposing ongoing vested interest groups, in a way that feels almost like, surely that can't be true. Surely.
Well, look, we actually thought for years it couldn't be true. Like when I first got reported to the medical board, and I've been reported 3 times, and cleared, it only took 5 years and several $100,000. So if any of your listeners want to actually, throw some money at me, that's fine.
Yes.
But look, I'm still an orthopaedic surgeon. I'm still, most important thing is I'm still married to one person. So, we're okay. But it's been a journey, because I honestly thought when I started talking about sugar, and when I went public with that, was targeted by someone working with Coca-Cola within 24 hours. And, it didn't take long for them to come at me. And then when the medical board came at me, I honestly thought it was a joke. I'm talking about sugar and for my patients with diabetes, because I'm sick and tired of amputating their limbs. That's the long and the short of it. But the rhetoric that then flowed on from that, because a surgeon talking about anti-processed food, anti-sugar, that rolled on to low carb. But in the early days, it was just about sugar. And it was one thing for celebrities and celebrity chefs to be talking about it, but the moment a surgeon got on board who actually started saying, actually, I'm real life here, day to day seeing the complications of it, then all of a sudden that had more power in social media than I actually realised. And as a result of all of that, ended up being targeted for holding that position. Literally, I thought, are you kidding? You're not really coming after me. But it just, as each month rolled on, and it got more and more serious, and more players, and then get reported again, each time by dietitians. And then they start bringing in this expert witness who's actually, a few years down the track, we work out that he's actually working for the breakfast cereal industry at the time. He failed to declare that conflict of interest. And then I was going to be, literally, I've got the paperwork saying, you are going to lose your registration if you keep talking about this. And, we're going to suspend you because you're dangerous to the population for talking. And they said, you're not qualified to talk about it. You and I have the same medical degree, which is based on science and biochemistry. And the stuff I talk about in the Krebs cycle in particular, it's biochemistry in the first 30 or 40 pages. It's not, as I say, in the fine print. This is what every single one of us should be standing up for. It's life itself is the Krebs cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there is a sort of a story that goes, well, doctors don't learn anything about nutrition, or they have one lecture on nutrition. And it's like, okay, I understand that lots of doctors don't value food as medicine in the way that perhaps you and I do. But we do learn basic biochemistry and basic physiology, which involves understanding elements of nutrition.
What happens inside a cell is biochemistry, it's science. What happens outside a cell is politics, religion, money, non-science, or which I say is very closely, when you actually misspell non-science, it says nonsense. And it's fascinating because I honestly thought, I'm not stupid, but I am naive. Because at the beginning of all this, I said to Belinda, oh, look, this biochemistry of fructose, half of sugar, has just been worked out. This is 2010, 2011. Oh, this is so obvious how bad it is. It'll all be over in 6 months. Everyone will wake up and go, okay, we've worked out the biochemistry of it. And here we are, I don't know what, 13, 14 years down the track, 13 years down the track going, we're still the same thing. It is biochemistry, and it's clearly not in the interest of the vast food industry and the pharmaceutical industry to acknowledge it. So it's just been smoke and mirrors and throwing it up and keeping the public confused. And we were talking beforehand about carnivore, which is, oh crikey, that's so radical. Well, in fact, that's low carb. Some of my talks I've talked about that evolution of diet. So the vast majority of people are eating what's called the SAD, whether or not it's a standard Australian, standard American, standard. It's a standard diet which is as almost recommended. It's high in carbs, high in processed food. The vast majority of people are getting fatter and sicker. And we know that latest data out of the US and reflected here in Australia is 93.2% of the population are metabolically unwell. And we all know that. You can see that in your practice walking down the street. So when the people decide to actually concentrate on what fuel they put in their engine, we pay more attention to what fuel we put in our cars and what we put in our bodies. When you pay attention to that, people then go, oh, I'm going to eat by the dietary guidelines, which is what I did. And I still didn't lose weight. I put a bit of weight on and I was outrunning my bad diet or my food pyramid diet. And then people say, okay, there's a group that decide, okay, I'm really going to go hard at this. And then they find low carb, healthy fat. We've seen a reshaped food pyramid. Or they go vegan.
Yes.
And both of which improve health initially because you're getting rid of the garbage out of your diet. And then as you transition, and I like vegans because they've taken interest in their health and the planet and whatever. Unfortunately, they've been caught up in a whole lot of propaganda and misinformation, and they will end up being nutrient deficient. You just can't do it without significant supplementation, and it's hard work. And then they get a bit sicker, and then a lot of them then move to LCHF, low carb. I call it healthy fat, not high fat. Gosh, I vested interest, I do have lowcarbhealthyfat.com, but we do nothing with it. But I registered that years ago because I said, look, we've got to stop calling it low carb high fat. It might be higher fat, but it's healthier fats because that gives, an impression that you're just having a diet full of fat. And those people who do have too much fat in their diet, and we can talk about that on the roadshow, is, don't overdo it because you're going to get into trouble. So it's healthy fat. Anyway, so they move to LCHF. Then they've got a group then who decide actually for health reasons, they decide to go into ketosis and go keto. So that's hardcore, very low carb. And then there's a group that for health reasons primarily decide to actually really drop those omnivorous vegetables. And, I think you've got a couple of people, who are coming along talking about
carnivore.
Over in Perth.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, absolutely.
So where you actually start looking critically at the lectins, the pectins, the oxalates that come in the vegetables. And for some people, going carnivore gives them another layer of health improvement. And it may not be for everyone all the time, but there are certain periods, you asked me whether or not I'm carnivore. And I'm, as I say, when Belinda's not around cooking vegetables, I find it easy to batch and just have and it's not as though I'm having tons of meat. I'm having my eggs and my cheeses and supplementing it with meat. And even though Sean Baker's a mate of mine, I'm not going out and just having a raw steak,
Yeah. But and look, it's interesting because there's, people like Sean and Anthony Chafee, who are prominent carnivore enthusiasts, and aesthetically they are very attractive humans. They're built incredibly well. I suspect they have some excellent genetics around muscle building, and they, look after themselves as well. But I think that there's also a danger, though, that people who don't necessarily know the reason why they're doing it go into carnivore because they want to look like them.
Oh, look, I think you can do veganism if it's well constructed with supplementation. I think you can do carnivore if you concentrate on it. I can talk about eating nose, tail, having respect for the animal, and so you do need, I think, and again, this is almost a point of contention in the carnivore world, I think you need to have some liver-based product in there, of which you can have pate, or I've got a Germanic background, so I have liverwurst. And you don't need heaps of it. It's not as though you're eating, or I have super meatballs where you get a bit of liver and you put 50 to 100 grams of that in a kilo of mince. So you sneak it in. But I do think you need some of those organ meats. Here's a lion, you take a lion in the wild and it kills something, it will actually eat the brains, the kidney, the liver, the spleen, and the fat, and then it will eat the meat. And so it's the meat's left for the hyena. So there's something in that. The highest density nutritional food is actually the organ meats and the fats. And so therefore, if you're just eating for protein and meat itself, then that's not ideal either. Again, I don't think carnivore is for everyone, but it's interesting those people who are lecturing in that field off camera are pretty well moving away from having lots of vegetables. Omnivorous, because I like a bit of extra colour on the plate. But we have a vegetable garden here. I don't know how many people have a vegetable. It's really, really hard to grow vegetables so you've got enough to feed the family. There's a lot of water, there's a lot of bugs, so you've got to try and counteract those with whichever method you're going to have. But I've actually got sheep out in the paddock here, and I'm pointing out to the side for everyone who can't see this conversation. And, I just make certain they've got water.
Yeah, that's sort of easier.
and then they don't even drink it because most of the time because they get enough off the ground. And when you start looking at the bigger picture, which is where I've drifted, is to our agricultural practices and our environment, an animal-based diet is positive on the environment. I know, that's contentious, but in fact that is, because they actually eat grass on the whole, particularly on marginal land. Someone at a Greens wedding I went to recently, she said the pigs and the sheep have been farming carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and into our soil. So an animal-based diet, actually done properly, is actually positive for the environment. But a plant-based diet takes nutrition from the soil. And the biggest agricultural export on the planet is topsoil. When you start really looking down this pathway, you find that the fall of the Roman Empire was related to their agricultural practice rather than their power plays. They actually ran out of food for the people as they tracked around the Mediterranean, and they farmed the topsoil and stripped it all bare. Middle East used to be a temperate rainforest.
Wow.
And so this whole concept that a plant-based diet is good for us and good for the planet, can't use too many expletives this early in the morning, is actually just not based on science again. It's based on emotion, and it's based on the fact that the plant-based food industry wants us to hear that rhetoric because plant-based foods have longer shelf life, higher transportability and profitability.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? There's a product that blows my mind that's called Just Egg. The company, it's called, that's it. It's massive. It's a great big thing, Just Egg. And all their pictures on their, because I went and looked on their website. It's all, there's pictures of omelettes. There's all these things that banging on about Just Egg. And there's no egg in this. It should be called Just Not Egg. I don't understand. Look, I get it. There are people out there with egg allergies, and for them, maybe this is a good product. But for the rest of the population, it's why are you trying to pull this, again, smoke and mirrors? It's like you're trying to trick us. We're not that stupid. But yet that whole product.
So this is where Belinda's work comes into its own, because when you find out that the vast majority of that propaganda actually comes from, as its origins in the Seventh Day Adventist Church, in the temperance movement in the 1850s to 1870s. But again, the Seventh Day Adventist Church, everyone goes, oh, who are they? But they're the second biggest educator in the world after the Catholic Church. They started the cereal industry of the world, the Western soy industry, the alternate meat industry, the stevia industry. They're vertically integrated into the farming practices and the pharmaceutical industry. They're incredibly smart. They've done a wonderful job of actually getting this ball rolling so that a large proportion of the world say, okay, plant-based is better for us and better for the planet. I'm sorry, no, it's not. It's based on a religious ideology and zealotry to push a product for a religious cause. And so the vegans, for instance, don't realise that they're foot soldiers for a church.
No, and you're right, absolutely right. Even Sanitarium, lots of people don't realise it's owned by the Seventh Day Adventists. And when you tell people that, they go, really? Oh, I had no idea. Because they really...
And don't pay taxes.
Yes. And they really have done that Trojan horse of... They're not pushing religion as their selling point, but they're getting people to do the things that their religion wants them to do, i.e. not eat meat because that's sinful. And so it's like they're saving the world.
No, they're saving themselves, actually. They're not actually saving the world. They're telling you that you're saving the world. Everything I've said and Belinda said is actually acknowledged by them, okay? We've actually got, there's an article in 2019 in a journal called Religion where they actually acknowledge every bit of this. But most importantly, they have Belinda's works and their references. And she still works with a lot of people in and outside, the current and ex-members, and they all agree with her. So I think the plan is actually, once we all turn towards veganism, okay, once we all turn to it, don't have to all do it, but we turn towards it, then Christ will return. And Christ will return for the saviour of 144,000. There's about 18 to 20 million of them on the planet, so I don't quite know how they're going to work that out. But when that prophecy was, again, we're talking 19th century prophecies, that was all very feasible, the 144,000 and the second coming of Christ and all that sort of thing. And it may sound crazy that we're talking about this, but the longer I talked about the science of low carb and, at a cellular level, and I got into trouble with APRA for making things too simple. I don't know if you knew about that. One of the things, you're making things too simple. I said, no, it is this simple, and I'm going to use pictures in my talk so that people can understand it. Anyway, so the longer I talked about the science and the longer others talked about the science, and we saw the health benefits for not just the individual but the wider community, the more it became about the non-science. So therefore, it's really important to understand Belinda's work to say, okay, you hold that belief. Now, if I want to have a conversation, like we're having a conversation now, I know what hat you're wearing. Even if you don't know. You know what hat I'm wearing. But there are lots of people in this world, including the health profession, advisory groups, guideline committees, who have vested interests, and sometimes they don't even know that they have them. And so therefore my job is when I go into a discussion group, and I hope that we'll talk on the roadshow about what progress we've made at a guideline level. You talked about me being a trailblazer, and what is it? I think the pioneers take the arrows and the settlers take the land. I love that one. So, but as a result of that,
you certainly have taken a few arrows. Just saying.
Middle name's Teflon, and I had a fair amount of stuff thrown at it. One of the wonderful things is that when we go into these guideline committees and or into government discussions, we've done a lot of research, particularly Belinda, on what hat the people are wearing on the opposite side of the table. And there was a fair blow-up at a talk that I gave in another state at James Mukey's invitation. I said, you want me to play good cop, bad cop here? And James is obviously going to be the good cop. But it completely blew up because they did not like the fact that I called them out right at the beginning on their vested interests. I specifically said, I'm not working with this pharmaceutical company. I'm not working with that pharmaceutical company. I'm definitely not working with Sanitarium, knowing that the people I was debating against were.
Yes.
And so that puts them on the back foot, makes a fairly antagonistic environment, but nonetheless, we're making progress down those guideline pathways. And the great thing now is low carb is now part of the National Diabetes Strategy. So we've moved from not only having it accepted, at an APRA level, we've now got this as part of the National Diabetes Strategy. So I will argue that at the coalface, if as a healthcare professional, you have to be talking about it. If you're not going to talk about it, I'm going to report you to APRA.
Yes, because you're not giving people all the options.
All the options, nor the current advice.
Yes, interesting, isn't it? It is. I find it, fascinating. And as you said, there is, and probably in the medical community, there is maybe a higher proportion of people who are vegan, now rebranded as, plant-based. And I think that's because vegans have always had that reputation of, how do you know if someone's a vegan? Just wait, they'll tell you. So a bit of zealotry in their talks, which I understand, because every now and then, not every now and then, in fact, quite often, I feel like a zealot in the low carb space. So I do get why they love talking about it. But they're really, for a lot of people, very closed about the idea of that animal products can actually be part, in fact, and you and I would know, not just can be, should be part of a healthy diet.
The statistics, and goodness knows who comes up with this thing, is that, theoretically, a certain portion of the population are vegan or low carbing or carnivore, blah, blah, blah. But the vast majority of vegans actually come back towards animal-based product. And you can go onto YouTube and social media and find out the ex-vegan, and whenever the prominent person on Instagram gives up, openly admits that they're having some meat again, the rhetoric against them is just amazing. But you never hear about, I didn't go on about if someone's carnivore and they have a vegetable, we're not taking them down on YouTube now.
Yeah.
This just happened to me. The moment I found out I was wrong, it's very confronting. And so for me, as a doctor, to actually realise that I have been prescribing harm by the food pyramid, not only was I causing harm for myself, that is the selfish portion, I was harming society by promulgating this food pyramid, but we've actually apologised to our children. I'm sorry about all that, vegetable oil we cook stuff in, or margarine that we cook this stuff, because we think we've caused harm. So it's a really huge step for someone to admit that they got it wrong. You will know that it's really hard for doctors to admit that they got it wrong. It's much easier just to keep prescribing and continue on your way and do the guidelines, because the guidelines are safe and you're not going to get into trouble with the medical board. The last time the medical profession had to say sorry was thalidomide. We might come on to some other more current issues in the last few years, but the last time we had to officially say we were sorry was thalidomide. It's either 10 to 50,000 people worldwide were affected by thalidomide and limb deficits as well. But here we're talking about 93.2% of the Australian population. We're talking about hundreds, billions of people around the world who have been harmed by a food pyramid that we've been prescribing and in telling people, you're fat, you're not a need to lose weight, you need to eat properly. Well, in fact, the food pyramid, as I say, if you want to eat by the food pyramid, which is part of our culture, you're going to die by the food pyramid, and along the way you're going to look like the food pyramid.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a visual thing, but it's true. It's literally true. The pear-shaped habitus, because I'm not a nice person ultimately, I do go to the shops and I actually I don't look at people, I look at their shopping trolley first, and then I determine what body shape they're going to have based on what I saw in the food. When I go food shopping, I actually have nursing staff, apparently, that send their husbands along to see what I've got in my shopping trolley.
Yeah.
Because we're in the public arena.
Well, it's interesting because the shopping trolley, there is a thing called the shopping trolley Instagram posts or Facebook posts, and they're prominent usually dietitians, who will put a picture of what they've put in their shopping trolley. It's not going to look anything like your shopping trolley and my shopping trolley. The only person who I've ever seen who puts a shopping trolley up that looks a bit like one of ours is Jessica Turton. So it's not all dietitians.
Well, she's not a dietitian. She's a good person. Oh!
Well, I think we have to be mindful. There are some dietitians, who are low carb, and there's Jess, there's Nicole Moore, and there's a number of what we would probably call enlightened, and they're going against the grain of their profession.
Well, again, this is their textbooks were written by the Seventh Day Adventist Church, the processed food industry. Leonard Cooper, who started the American Dietetics Association, literally was working for John Harvey Kellogg at the time. Seventh Day Adventist Church. We've got the 1920 textbooks of dietetics, and you can buy them online because they're cheap as, I think $5 you can buy a 1920 odd the textbook. And so therefore their textbooks have been written by the processed food, vegetarian, vegan industry for over 100 years. So therefore, again, dietitians don't like to know that. I've got lots of dietitians who are good friends, who are enlightened, have moved away from their textbooks. The dietitians we had at Nutrition for Life, we got down, said, get your textbooks out, show me the word meat in there. It talked about protein, didn't talk about meat. They've been raised in that situation, and the smart ones who have worked out that they've actually had unfulfilling careers in private practice, because a lot go into industry, a lot go into hospitals, but those who have unfulfilling careers, they quit. But those who have actually enlightened and actually go to work and actually do prescribe a more low-carb, healthy, fat lifestyle are seeing dramatic improvements and getting great job fulfillment. Absolutely.
But, again, it's that thing, as you said, there's just pictures of trolleys that are full of processed food, and the inference being for people, again, if you're Joe Blow, you're just a person, you're looking for an expert to give you advice on what you should be eating, and you look at this shopping trolley post, it's full of processed food. It's not full of lettuce and tomatoes and meat. It's full of muesli bars and flavoured yogurts and all those things.
I actually had a website called... on a Facebook page called My Hospital Food, where I encouraged everyone to put up their hospital food photos. Apart from the fact that I thought it was funny, and it was also deadly serious as to what was being served in hospitals. In the process of all that, APRA requested that I take it down because, I was being too inflammatory. And I said, no, this is the hospital food which is being served up, which is nutrient deficient, protein deficient, and I can't get my patients better. And this wasn't just my hospital. This was literally hospitals around the world.
It's still happening. I mean, there's some differences between various hospitals. There are some hospitals that are actually providing reasonable food. But one of our members recently, who's been on the podcast, who spoke a lot about her sugar addiction and how her mental health was just woeful and, compounded by terrible mental health, therefore eating a block of chocolate a day, worsening mental health. Once she stopped the chocolate, her mental health improved. She does not want to go back to any sugar. And yet this hospital kept foisting high carb, high processed food upon her. And when she refused to eat it, they then, they sent in the psychiatric liaison officer to see if there was something wrong with her. It's like, no, I just don't want to eat your food. And then she was just labelled the difficult person.
When we catch up off camera down in Hobart, which is the worst end of Tasmania, by the way, so it's not quite as nice as here in the north in Lonnie. But I'll tell you, some other stuff about hospital food and phone calls that I get at times about kids with acute type 1 diabetes. And I have an off-the-record discussion. And I say, do this, get total glucose control within 6 hours, and here are the people in those states which actually can support you.
Yeah, I know. It's I'm looking forward to your talk because I think, the idea is that we've come a long way, but there's a long way to go. When I was in America not that long ago and going into their shops, our processed food industry is a juggernaut, but over there it's like 10 times what we've got. And I can see The packaging is much brighter, shinier. The low fat is still everywhere. And I just sort of got in there and went, oh, God, this is...
Well, interesting thing about the US, I haven't been there for a couple of years because of COVID and not travelling, is that we were in LA, Los Angeles, a few years ago, and for the first 3 or 4 days, didn't see anyone who was obese. And we went, well, hang on, what's happened to this obesity epidemic in the US? And then we went down to Disneyland and we found them.
Yeah, the southern states are...
Oh, no, that was because in Disneyland everyone comes around from the whole country, then it comes along.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, Disneyland, California, probably you went to. Florida.
Disneyland.
Yeah.
That's a long flight across to Florida. I made the observation that the US population is like a two-hump camel. You got a whole lot of population are healthy, and then you've got the second hump where they're super obese. And obviously the predilections are there, but that literally you find this bipolar sort of two groups of people. But in Australia, we're a single hump camel, and we've shifted that hump to the right. We've gotten more obese. So the whole population has moved down that pathway in Australia, whereas in the US, they're a two-hump camel.
Yes, interesting, isn't it?
But still, they're metabolically unwell. That's my observation of more than one trip and both, well, the West, the East, as well as the Midwest. The Midwest actually was pretty heavy, though.
Yeah. And, and I guess just to circle back to your conversation about agriculture, the Americans do it way differently. I mean, in Australia, we're lucky. We don't have huge feedlots like they do. A lot of our cattle's just raised on grass and our sheep are raised on grass, and it's not like them. Like, I just couldn't believe it. I spoke to a guy who was at, who's a low carber. Like, he loves low carb, but he actually runs a cattle station. It's not a cattle station. He just runs the feedlot bit. So the cows get shipped in just to his farm for the last whatever, and he basically just feeds them soy and all the leftover grainy rubbish and fattens them up and then ships them off. And it was like, oh.
Well, to be fair, we actually do that in Australia as well. So the Queensland cattle industry, and I have actually spoken to the beef industry on a couple of occasions, but they to give continuity, they do fatten, they do finish, they grain finished a lot of Queensland, so that actually gets the seasonality out of it, because they don't have the grasses all year round. So they do bring them into, well, we do have some feedlot cattle in Australia, but they do bring them in for grain finishing to smooth out the market forces as much as anything. Here in Tasmania, we do have a feedlot. I know it's down there because you can get the feedlot manure, and the pH of that is actually out of control. It's very alkaline. Killed all of our camellia. I had a camellia hedge once. I thought I was doing the right thing, but then had to dig out 50 metres of a camellia hedge because I'd poisoned it all.
Oh, no.
So if we just need to get smarter, like the beef industry, for instance, has a proposal to actually sensibly farm our national forests, like graze the undergrowth and prevent the fire risk. And so therefore, if we get sensible about our marginal land, which actually can't be, it's not for flat for agricultural purposes, and we use our 20% or at least on the planet of marginal grasslands and farm them, then that has actually got a cyclical benefit for the planet. We reduce our fire risk, and everyone, fire cause far more environmental damage and CO2 release than...
Oh, absolutely, and horrendous damage to wildlife.
Yes, there is no life without death in a food cycle. It's just what point in time you call... You can't, and that's Leah Keith who wrote there. Yeah. So that's, I think I paraphrased her quote there somewhere. But nonetheless, the more you look at it, we are all completely interrelated. And we are just animals. And we have the same biochemistry as an animal. I love the portal vein. Portal vein comes into the liver.
Yes. I think that might be a quote. Like, nobody I have ever heard say that before. I love the portal vein.
I love the portal vein. No, I love that as an example. So the portal vein is the major tube coming from the gut up into the liver. And the fatty acids going up there are short-chain fatty acids. That's how the metabolism of the gut wants short-chain fatty acids to hit the liver. Now, if you are a cow, you break down all your grasses and whatever in all the foreguts into short-chain fatty acids, and that goes up the portal vein. If you're a gorilla, it's the hindgut that breaks down all that fermentation. It's a huge fermentation vat, and it breaks it down to short-chain fatty acids, which go up the portal vein. We as humans don't have 3 foreguts and we don't have a massive hindgut. We need to eat short-chain fatty acids so they can go up the portal vein. So what goes up the portal vein is the same whether or not you're a cow or a chimpanzee or a gorilla or a human. So just get with it, you know. And so therefore you can't ferment all those grasses and vegetables and plants into short-chain fatty acids as a human. You need to eat them. So, sorry, biochemistry, end of topic, goodbye. That's it.
Yes, I could talk to you for hours. I'm sure our listeners could listen to you for hours. You're, as I said, a font of not just knowledge but experience in the low-carb world. You've taken more hits than anybody I know. Maybe Tim Noakes, you and he are definitely the pioneers.
Tim's a good mate, obviously. One of my great honours in life is at the Low Carb First World Summit in Cape Town. I got to introduce Tim for his plenary speech. And when I was cleared by APRA, Tim and our cases were going on at the same time. His was more public than mine. Mine was a kangaroo court. It only can come in Australia. But nonetheless, the very first person we rang after it all was Tim. I can still remember his grin. He was having a coffee in Cape Town, and he just grinned when he heard that I'd gotten off, because that meant that his name had been cleared on this. Annika Dahlqvist in Sweden had been cleared. My name had cleared. It literally opened the door for us all.
Yes. Absolutely. And as I said, for all the low-carb practitioners, you know, it's just meant that we can just, and as you said, not only can we prescribe it, we should be prescribing it, but without you know, trailblazing that and really APRA having to fall on their sword and reverse their decision and actually, you know, say, oh, okay, then a lot of doctors would still be frightened.
Well, there's still dietitians who are frightened about it, and because not everyone's been able to come in from the cold. Jen Elliott is a dietitian in New South Wales, and she's been writing extensively on this before me. She lost her position as a dietitian and has never been able to be re-registered again. So, and I catch up with Jen from time to time. She hasn't gotten off.
No.
And so therefore, despite everything and all the proof now, what the Dietitians Australia haven't not backed down on her case. And I'll keep calling it out, because Jen is a lovely person who was completely smashed by her own association, and she was right.
Yes. And it's interesting because for, you know, our listeners may not be aware that dietitians are not regulated by APRA. So APRA is the Australian Health Practitioners Association. Doctors and anybody under the APRA umbrella, we're highly regulated, which means that, you know, we've got laws and rules around what we can say, what we can say in advertising, and dietitians aren't regulated by them, and nutritionists aren't either.
No, but neither is your mother.
No.
Because your mother told you what to eat as well.
Yes.
I use that argument. I mean, my mother, our parents are the very first ones who create nutritional guidelines in the household.
Yeah, and look, that in itself, I think, has been some of the... Like, I look at my household, and my mum was still is a long-term dieter, still goes to diet clubs, still, you know, Weight Watchers, whatever it is. And so for me as a 16-year-old girl, I grew up in the dieting culture, and so started dieting at 16 with various, you know, rubbish diets, and then outsourced my eating to some company that told me about points or, coloured, red, you know, just all different things. And I forgot how to eat. I didn't know how to do it. Whereas animals in the wild, they're not doing that. You don't see a lion who thinks, oh, I've had one too many gazelle today. I better, you know, run a few laps. It's humans that have lost our connection to our food and as such outsourced a lot of that to, again, processed food industries who will put labels on the front of their packet telling people that, this forms 10% of their daily intake, so you should eat it, or whatever it is. We've just lost our way.
Well, remind me when we do the roadshow to talk about food labelling.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Because we've been able to get, by presenting to parliamentary Senate inquiry, to get some of our food labelling laws changed.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, because I just think they're wicked and they can write healthy. Actually, I hate that word healthy on food. It's interesting because I think that anything can go from being helpful to our health to unhelpful. If you were to eat 5 kilos of cheese a day, even though cheese itself is a good product, that overconsumption of it is probably not going to do you any good. And so it's this idea that because something has the word healthy on it, our brains go, oh, goody, I can eat as much as I like.
I think I've rewritten the dietary guidelines for the world because I'm a surgeon and arrogant. And I put it in one sentence, which has gone to the National Health and Medical Research Council here in Australia, but they said, because there's a dietary guideline review going on at the moment and millions and millions of dollars are going to be spent on it. I said, look, for $3 million you can have my paragraph. My sentence, and I'll save you a lot of bother. And it's pretty simple, and I'll still stand by it. It is actually low carb by definition when you take it apart, but we should all be eating fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on our culture and environment, avoiding added sugar and processed food. And when you take that apart, it means that if something's coming in a cardboard box or a plastic bag and it's got a label on it, it's probably not supposed to be there.
Yes.
And that's healthy because it's important that I laugh at myself because I've got a family that laughs at me. We had some karaoke machine thing that the kids had because I'm tone deaf. Don't ever ask me to sing. And
right. Noted.
There was a word. I was just going by the words that were coming up on the karaoke thing, and the kids were laughing at me because I kept on saying, because it changed from one screen to the other. I was going, heal thy. Because I don't pay attention to the words in any song. I didn't realise the person was saying healthy because it was sort of split, and I was concentrating on trying to get it right. So there's a video somewhere of me actually singing heal thy rather than healthy, not realising that down the track we'd find out that heal thy was completely and utterly conflicted in our healthy eating message by the Adventist Church. So it is about religious fervour rather than actual well-being.
Ah, indeed. Well, Gary, this has been a fascinating chat, and I cannot tell you how looking forward I am to seeing your talk at the Low Carb Roadshow in Tassie. If people wanted to follow, you and, I've got Belinda's details, but does she do most of your social media stuff these days?
I'm very active on Twitter. I find Twitter you can be naughtier there.
I've got to tell you that I am I'm gun shy in Twitter. I call Twitter Fight Club, and for people who are good at fighting, it's a very good forum, I think. But I have one little fight and I just go, oh my God, I can't be here. I have to run away. So
when things get a bit nasty out there, I went through a phase where it was my favourite thing to do was block a vegan a day, and they were coming at me.
Right.
But once you get a certain amount of following on there, people actually, and we have to thank social media. It got me into trouble, but I also have to be thankful that it got us out of trouble, because the population get behind you and actually support you. And like when I got the final decision was being made against me to take my registration away, or threatened with it, with APRA, Belinda wrote a post on social media, which was seen over 1 million times. And APRA were completely inundated with it. Asim Malhotra, who's a good mate as well, Asim talked about it on BBC World News. And so therefore we were able to create this international noise and then put the system back under its own pressure. And they actually did some really dumb things around social media, which you should never do. As you say, they actually got angry. But as a result of that, they overstepped the mark and then allowed for me ultimately to be exonerated. So social media, you'll find most of my talks and Belinda's talks on YouTube. That's a nice, calm platform. We're not doing nearly as much as we should probably do on social media with Facebook and such. I'm on Twitter. I think what most people don't understand is realise how much we're actually doing behind the scenes now at a national and international guideline levels, and really working hard in that space. And a lot of it is doing more support, like having a chat to you, supporting those other people that are now coming up. And so I've still got another few hours of that to do today, of actual just working in that space. But that's the important bit.
Yeah, absolutely right. That is the important bit. You know, it's not nearly as exciting as and prominent, as you said, as getting on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is and having a rant, which I don't mind doing that. I quite like having a rant. I just don't want anyone to come back at me, but that's okay. But it's that stealth work behind the scenes. And I know Dr. Liz Fraser does a lot in GP land. She's like a prolific article writer in GP magazines, trying to educate GPs around low carb. There's you, there's obviously James Mukey, all helping to change the government and the dietary guidelines so that the people who are just Joe Blow, the public, aren't hoodwinked all the time by these bloomin' vested interest groups stealing their money and their health.
Well, we describe it to James as he gets a bit frustrated from time. He's actually adopted, he wants to adopt my New Year's resolution, which was that I let everyone know that I was going to be less tolerant of fools this year.
Right.
And one of my mates said, "Oh, you're going to move from 1% to 0. I got a text message. I'll let from James. He'll know that I'll tell tales on him. He said he just sent me, "I think I'm going to adopt your New Year's resolution."
Yes.
But we describe very much as whack-a-mole. You know, like they've stuck their head up. Okay, and it's hard work actually playing whack-a-mole because it's constantly coming back at you, going, "Oh, that's dangerous. That's dangerous." No, that's propaganda. That's been misreported. That's actually a headline grabber. That's the stuff which sells magazines based on fear or sells an article based on fear and misconceptions. And therefore, we can't do it ourselves. We do actually need other people like yourself, anybody, to play the whack-a-mole, because they just start speaking up about it. Tell the human story. Tell the biochemical story. This is actually helping people. And it's in different degrees for different people. Let's say 90% of people did 90% of what we said 90% of the time, then we'll have solved the health crisis that's facing most Western nations at this point in time of metabolic health.
Oh, absolutely.
And if we did 50% of people did 50% of it, we'll actually bring our thresholds down and probably save the health system. And that's the argument I talk to the politicians about. So not everyone has to do it. Not everyone has to be hardcore. But if we move in that direction, we'll turn around what's already a tsunami of ill health, which is overwhelming society, health systems.
And it's interesting. I mean, it has led on, everyone's talking about there's a crisis in general practice. There's not enough GPs. The crisis isn't necessarily in general practice. The crisis is in the way we practice medicine these days. Nobody has the time to go to the root cause. Everyone's just playing Band-Aid medicine, prescribing more pills. That's quick, easy to get out, seems to have, it fixes something short term, and now we're, looking at the consequences of that healthcare model of just trying to treat long-term chronic disease in a short-term acute medical model.
Oh, it's band-aiding sick care is the term. And I say to the polys, we don't need more nurses, we don't need more doctors, we don't need more money. We need to spend what we've got wisely. That figure of, I quote 93% because that's the current one. Only a couple of years ago, it was 88% in the last sort of look at literature. And the system, albeit was struggling, was coping. I call this like a dam wall. We've now just gotten to the point where the metabolic health issues are literally flowing over and everything's being swamped, flooded, blah, blah, blah. But if we can actually reduce that load down by 5% and bring it down to 88% again, then the system will cope again. And the lowest hanging fruit there is diabetes. If we take the fact that at least 10% of the population have got diabetes, another 10% have got undiagnosed diabetes, and probably 60% of the population are pre-diabetic, depending on how you measure that. If we can get 2/3 of the population to reduce their carb intake, then we'll have reduced that metabolic load on the system, poor metabolic load, back underneath the level of the dam wall, and the whole system will cope again. So stop throwing more money at band-aiding it.
Yeah, I know.
Just let's go hard at one thing, and type 2 diabetes is, I think, literally that lowest hanging fruit. And let's just get the system back into control and then look at the bigger, wider picture about all the other health issues which may come. And you touched on mental health, and, diet and mental health is starting to become a hot topic in that circle, in that area. And I think, and again, the same percentages of people who've got mental health issues. When we address diabetes and mental health with diet, we might have just brought a whole degree of control back into the system.
Well, and I mean, it's come, there's been people, as you know, Georgia Eade, working in that space, but Chris Palmer's book, I think, has been so helpful for people to recognise it. And his, theory is that mental illness is metabolic illness.
He's written a book. Okay, I've seen Chris talk, and Georgia's gorgeous. She's a lovely lady. Yeah, no, Chris Palmer's book, it's called Brain Energy, and it is fascinating. I listened to it in the car driving Melbourne to Sydney, and basically, it talks a lot about mitochondrial health and, what is the thing that's impairing our mitochondria these days, insulin resistance, and how do we fix it, blah, blah, blah. And, it talks a lot, again, about a ketogenic diet as a tool for mental illness. And he caveats with, not every single person he has seen has responded, but a huge majority have. So why wouldn't you at least offer it and give it a crack? Well, that's our big go at guidelines at the moment. The National Dietary Guidelines, Australian healthy eating, is for the healthy population. Dietary guidelines for the healthy population. So they're not relevant. Which is now, 7%? Yeah, so it's, 6.8, so don't overestimate it. Sorry. So the important thing about that is, if we in fact accept that the dietary guidelines are for a minority group of people, let's ignore them. And let's actually start targeting dietary guidelines for specific conditions. So type 2 diabetes, that responds well to LCHF. Mental health, a large number of people respond well to LCHF. Heart failure, a large number of people respond well to LCHF. Renal failure, and we're working in all these areas, responds to LCHF. Cancer management has a positive effect. I'm not saying it cures cancer, because I've got accused of that. Has a positive effect in cancer management. LCHF. So it's funny how the same guidelines are actually relevant to all of these conditions, because they're all based on inflammation and insulin resistance, as you've talked about in other shows. So that's where we're heading at this point in time. It means playing whack-a-mole on more fronts, but they all sort of then corner each other into the same situation. Indeed. All right, my lovely friend, we've just clicked over an hour. It's a longie, my lovely listeners. And again, anyone who wants to come and meet Gary in person, listen to his inspiring talk, Low Carb Tassie, all the links will be in the show notes below, including Gary's Twitter handle, so that you can go and follow him and watch him take down some vested interest groups. And Belinda, yes. Yeah, no, we've got Belinda's details on her particular episodes, but I'll link them in here as well. No, but come and see Belinda. She's much nicer than me. You're both lovely, and very much looking forward to catching up with you. Okay, Lucy, have a great day. You too. Thank you very much. You're welcome. So, my lovely listeners, that ends this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. I'm Dr. Lucy Burns. And I'm Dr. Mary Barson. We're from Real Life Medicine. To contact us, please visit rlmedicine.com. And until next time, thanks for listening. The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualised medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.